Well, welcome everybody. It's one of my favorite things to chat with my wonderful colleagues once a week. And this week, I'm delighted to have Will Salatin back. Hi, Will.
Hi, Mona. It's one of my treats to get to spend every couple of weeks with you. As
Democrats are grappling with how they oppose Trump, and whether, whether they should use the issue of immigration, for example, this is where the lack of self-confidence on the part of Democrats, I think, has been in very sharp relief, where they're just not sure whether when they take on Trump, whether it might be political poison to, for example, stand up for Kilmar Abrego Garcia or other immigrants who've been wrongly either detained or deported. And they're so snake bit about the issue of immigration. And, what I would say, I'm not an advisor, not a political advisor to the Democrats, but what I would say is that, first of all, if you just look at polling since Trump has been in office, the immigration issue has become much less of an advantage for him. People are dismayed by the way he's going about it. So he's losing altitude in that sense. Second, you can make a case about immigration. You can say, now I do think that the Democrats flubbed this when Biden was president. I do think that allowing the border to get so out of control was a bad political move. But there is a way to say, yes, you're right. We need better control of immigration, but no, we are not going to give up our civil liberties. We are not going to railroad innocent people into gulags in foreign countries. The Democrats have to make that point loudly and self-confidently. And, because otherwise, if they say nothing, then they're still saddled with the image of the, pro-illegal immigrant party, right? They're not going to get away from that because the Republicans are portraying them as a party that doesn't care about the border and that wants to, flood the nation with these dark-skinned people who are it's the great replacement, whatever. All of those things that the Republicans say about Democrats are going to be the only story because Democrats are saying nothing because they're afraid. So they need to say something. What do you think? Am I right or wrong?
This is, we're going to be talking about this for the next 3 years. What you're reminding me of, Mona, is, look, I'm a big Pete Buttigieg fan. Pete Buttigieg did this vote vets thing. He was his big speech in Iowa. He does an event where and he goes and he says, Democrats have to figure out what we're for and we have to be willing to make some changes or whatever. And I'm watching my guy talk for an hour or so. And he keeps saying this. And I could not tell you a single item that he listed as something we can't throw these people under the bus. He's afraid to cross the sort of lefty interest groups or the lefty ideological groups. Nobody comes out with an idea. You're going to have to break some eggs here. You're going to have to upset somebody in the coalition. And you're going to have to get what you're talking about, Mona, which is an identity. You've got to choose. To govern is to choose. You want to form an opposition, you got to be clear about what you stand for. Maybe the Democrats can not say anything, and because Trump is destroying everything in sight, they'll win the midterms. That could happen. But okay, I'm just going to throw out my idea. So I'm not a hypocrite, right? Let's take immigration, right?
Yeah.
Weirdly, although I'm supposed to be the left guy at the Bulwark, I mean, now we've got some other people who have I was one of the first of the not former Republicans.
Yeah.
I look at immigration and I'm like, you know what? This is an issue where the Democratic Party did not do its job. You have borders. You may believe that borders should be open. Look what happens when you have a completely open border. You have we have these, gangs. We have giant businesses moving people up, selling, transportation into the country. It's completely rampant. You got people waiting in line to do it legally who didn't. It's a complete mess. Don't tell me that this is the way you should conduct immigration, right? So you have to enforce your borders. Democrats didn't do that. You can see how the immigration numbers have dropped once the Democrats decided, hey, actually, let's clamp down on the border. That happened under Biden. It happened even before
under
Trump,
Biden. That's right.
And that was a decision they made. They didn't need a law to do that, right? So the Democratic Party needs to say, we made a mistake. We are going to be the party. This is my bid. We're going to be the party of law and order. We're going to be the party of law, of order, and of obeying the rule of law. We're going to be the party of the Constitution. We're going to be the party that actually defends cops, even when the people who are attacking them are Trumpers with, batons and like flagpoles and stuff, right? Think of all the opportunities here. The January 6th pardons. We pardoned people who attacked the United States Capitol and beat up police officers and resulted in the deaths of officers. We're outsourcing our prisons. We're grabbing people off the street and sending them to a place in some prison in El Salvador where they're never heard from again. Complete violation of everybody's constitutional rights. I don't ask you to support every criminal. I don't ask you to support everyone who looks like a criminal, everyone with a tattoo, but everybody's got constitutional rights or you'll be snapped up off the street. And we've already got video of people being snapped up off the street. We don't want to be that kind of a country, do we? We have the spectacle now, Mona, of Trump's lawyers who defended him in these cases where he was obviously criminal, being put in charge of the Justice Department. One of them, Emil, was it Beauvais? How do I pronounce this guy's name?
Yeah.
He's a senior official.
Beauvais.
They're talking about making this guy a federal appellate judge. Like they're going to put him on an appellate court. This guy's single claim to fame, other than defending Trump, who was a criminal in that case, is that he's the guy who indirectly forced the ouster of all of these honorable prosecutors in Manhattan in the Eric Adams case. A guy who was guilty of, was charged with strong evidence of corruption, and Trump forced them to drop the case. And this guy was the enforcer. They are destroying the rule of law in this country. That is what the Republican Party is doing. There's a massive opportunity for Democrats to be the party that is culturally for law and order, and that includes enforcing it against Trumpers and the Trumpers who are undermining the rule of law in every way they can. That's my bit. Do you have one?
So, Will, first of all, I love this, but I have to say it is, so my first reaction is I'm picturing all of those people, including, Ted Cruz, and Mike Lee and others who styled themselves constitutional conservatives. I cannot tell you what a big deal it was to sort of use they had little pocket constitutions. I've got several of them. They had little pocket constitutions that they would wave around and say they were, just wanting to give it the Tea Party, right? They wanted to get back to the Constitution. This was a big thing on the right. And now they are completely trashing it. So, I think the Democrats should grab constitutionalism and rule of law 100%. But I will tell you that I worry that maybe for one thing, you can't use the term law and order because it's so steeped in decades of imagery of white Southerners with German shepherds, going after civil rights protesters and saying, we're just about law and order down here, people. So there's that. That might be an obstacle to embracing it. So maybe just law. We're for the rule of law, I think, is better than law and order because it doesn't have that odor attached to it.
Sure.
The rule of law party. Okay. And the anti-corruption party is what I would add to you, which is an old story, but honestly, it's one of the most effective political tools in anybody's toolbox is running against the guys on the other side for corruption. Even as recently as Alexei Navalny. I mean, he did talk about human rights. He did talk about individual liberties, but his big thing was the corruption. And that was why he was able to get millions of views on his YouTube channel and so forth, because he was showing people the palaces that Putin was building for himself, etc. That hits home. And so I would recommend the anti-corruption as a political tactic. But yeah, the Democrats, the Democrats, that's another thing. You hear people say, oh, we can only talk about kitchen table issues because people don't care about democracy. And it is true that in the latter years of the Biden administration, when you ask people whether they were voting on the issue of democracy, they would say, both Republicans and Democrats would say yes. Republicans would say our democracy is in danger because they believe the falsehood that the 2020 election was stolen, rigged. And Democrats believed it for all the reasons that we know about. January 6th, et cetera. So the idea that you can't talk about democracy because it doesn't have purchase, that might have been true to some extent in the 2024 year. But when newspapers are being harassed, when law firms are being harassed, when people are being literally bundled off streets and into unmarked van by masked men, and sent God knows where, when judges are demanding of prosecutors, where is this person whose habeas corpus rights are being violated? And they say, oh, well, we moved them. Oh, you moved them? Where did you? Well, we'll get back to you on that. Those kinds of things change the equation. They change the facts on the ground. I don't know. What do you think?
So to me, what you're describing, first of all, it is a huge issue. And there's a pattern, as you said, the law firms, the universities, the media. The latest thing I think is that CBS is capitulating to loss. And we're seeing one institution after another fold in the face of the authoritarian pressure, right? And Democrats,
we're also seeing some people standing up. Let's not lose sight of that. We are, but go on.
So Democrats we'll have to talk about that, should talk about that. I don't think that requires too much of a message because people sense it. This guy and the people around him have too much power, and they're threatening eventually every institution gets threatened by this. I do think Americans react to that. They don't like a king, and they don't like a guy who's acting like a king. So we can count on that backlash. That's regardless of what message you have. I don't know about the theme of democracy. And Mona, I'm just going to confess my pessimism here. I've lost faith that there are enough Americans who think about democracy in those terms. Or maybe it's the way you just described it. There are so many on the other side who think, yeah, I'm for democracy and they stole the election and all that. I want to come back to corruption though, because I like your point there. I feel like corruption is a better theme than democracy because it's eternal. It's been going on for a long time. People don't like it. People have a visceral sense that it's wrong, that it's cheating. It can be connected to all those rule of law topics that we were talking about. And it doesn't, something about democracy feels a little ethereal. Now, look, all of us who are at the Bulwark believe devoutly in the democracy, and this is what's driving us. We can see that it's being sabotaged. But I don't know if I believe it will work as a message. I think it's been tried and it wasn't strong enough.
Well, I'm not sure. It might not have been. I'm not sure. I'm undecided on that matter. But let me just say regarding the corruption arguments, that one other nice aspect of the corruption issue is that it's like a torpedo under the waterline to the whole populism appeal, right? Because the populace, in order to be popular, they have to seem to be for the people against those awful elites, right? And when you are accepting $400 million gifts, and when your people are getting absurdly rich because of meme coin scams, and when was it the Attorney General who sold a bunch of stock right before the Liberation Day tariffs were announced? She sold her shares in Trump in Trump stock. So that is, so anyway, all of those things create a very different image, that this is yet another elite that is taking you for marks and making out for themselves and not for the great people.
And in addition to being true, the great virtue of that theme is that it connects back to the Democrats' bread and butter, which is the party of the little people against the rich. And we have a continuation of Elon Musk, and we've seen polling that people believe that Musk, they didn't trust him. The billionaires making too many decisions. If they start hacking Medicaid as they're trying to do, and then the crypto stuff. I think all of this starts to go south. In other words, it becomes bad for the country, but better for the Democrats if it starts to bite people financially. Say the tariffs are in effect. These trade deals don't happen. Prices start to go up. People start to feel the pinch. And then they're much more open to this message about that the Trump administration, while pretending to be represent the people, actually represents the rich and is sticking it to the middle class.
Yep. Okay, let's talk about one more thing that is dear to the hearts of you and me and people like Bulwark readers, but maybe not to the most people, but it's still important. And that is, you talked about Trump's foreign trip and about his message, which is quite amazing in that in the baldness of the way in which he says, we are not interested in human rights. We're not interested in traditional American virtues. We are not going to tell you how to live, he says to the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Turks and various other people. Not that the Turks were there, but that was the message. Right. And yet, as you point out, he's perfectly willing, they are perfectly willing to tell some people how to live, like Europeans, who they've criticized for violating our values, right?
Right.
I mean, it's, and there's one other country that, this administration seems more than willing to criticize, to accuse of war crimes. South Africa, you point out, Will.
Yeah. This whole trip that Trump did to the Gulf states, it was the central message was, hey, that whole era where America pretended to be different and to care about democracy, to care about human rights, to care about values in general and promote them in the world, that's all over. We're done with that. Trump basically renounced every president before him. And when I say every president, it's not just Joe Biden, it's George W. Bush, implicitly in some ways, Ronald Reagan, the whole continuity of you may say, folks out there may believe that America never really stood for these values. I don't think that's true. But what Trump is saying is we're not even going to pretend that anymore. Yeah. We're not even going to aspire to that. And of course, he's totally embraced by his hosts, these Gulf monarchs, right? Including the guy who orchestrated the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, an American resident, right? Like, this is Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia. And Trump talks about how much he loves this guy. He loves I love you.
Too much.
And he said, there's a line where Trump says, he goes to the Saudis and says, we're not going to sit in judgment of you and your sins anymore. I mean, it couldn't have been more clear. We don't care who you kill. We really don't. And it's all about money. Trump comes back and says, hey, I got all these commitments of trillions of dollars of investment from these rich guys. And so meanwhile, of course, so it's an abdication of what made America different. Right? We're make America great again, except America's not going to be good anymore. We're not going to be different from any other country. Yeah. And at the same time, Trump
worse than many.
Yeah. And he's over at these monarchies, doesn't breathe a word about like the way they treat minorities or the way they treat women or about the occasional dissident who has to get killed or imprisoned. Meanwhile, who is the great sinner? The United States of America. Right. Yep. Trump complains, you don't never criticize your country on foreign soil. Here he is on foreign soil. And his central message about America is we have a phony electoral system. Our election was rigged against me. We're not a real democracy. You can't find a more anti-American message or a more anti-American person than this guy.
Yeah. Yeah. And tell them about the South Africa thing.
The South Africa, the South Africa, like he's over there. He's got many opportunities to speak up about the violations of human rights in those countries, in the Gulf countries. Doesn't say anything. Okay, he's being polite. goes out of his way, says, the one country that's really pissing me off that's doing something wrong is South Africa, because they're committing what he calls a genocide against the white farmers. Now, you can debate the term genocide, but this is not a term.
No, you can't. Not in this case. No.
Okay, no.
Not even remotely.
I try to stay away from arguments about genocide because I got friends who argue this in various contexts. But what's fascinating to me, this is a term that Republicans generally shun, except in the case of South Africa, when the alleged victims are these white landowners, right? Yeah. And now suddenly Trump is exercised about this. It's the same thing with the DEI stuff. We're not racist. We're not white supremacists. It's just that the only time we use the term genocide, the only time we complain about the mistreatment of a minority, it's against white people.
Yeah. And they're not going to tell these Middle Eastern dictatorships and monarchies how to behave and not to chop people up when they disagree with their policies. They're not going to do that because that's no longer America's message. But they are going to criticize the Europeans when they don't give a seat at the table to the sort of neo-Nazi adjacent party AfD. Then they're going to get a really, really strong talking to, because those aren't our values, said J.D. Vance. Wow.
I'm so upset now that I didn't have this conversation with you before I filed that piece, because that's such a great point. I did not at all make the connection to Vance. That is such a great point.
Oh,
because all of a sudden this comes back to me. The whole speech he gave, he lectured the Europeans, and it was about free speech for Nazis.
Yes.
Like, that's America's values now. So I was wrong. Sorry, I apologize for saying America only cares about money. They care about white power in South Africa.
Correct.
And they care about defending the Nazis and their free speech rights in Europe. Apologies.
Yes, that's exactly right.